After days of speculation, the United States has finally undertaken a mission to take out Iranian nuclear facilities. President Donald Trump announced that U.S. military carried out targeted strikes on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. Trump claimed the strikes hit the Fordo, Isfahan and Natanz facilities. The U.S. president described Fordo as the primary target, saying a full payload of bombs was dropped on the facility. Now located on the opposite side of Qom, Fordo is an enrichment site dug deep into a mountain and therefore probably better protected than the others. The 2015 deal did not allow Iran to enrich at Fordo at all, although it now has more than 1,000 centrifuges operating there, including advanced IR-6 machines capable of enriching uranium to up to 60%. Now, Isfahan is a large nuclear technology center on the outskirts of Iran's second largest city. It includes the fuel plate fabrication plant and the uranium conversion facility and can process uranium into the uranium hexafluoride that is fed into centrifuges. Well, there is reportedly equipment at Isfahan to make uranium metal, which can be used to devise the core of a nuclear bomb. The other important site is Natanz, a complex at the heart of Iran's enrichment program. Now, Natanz houses facilities including 2 enrichment plants, the vast underground fuel enrichment plant and the above-ground pilot fuel enrichment plant. U.S. President Donald Trump, in his address to the nation, said that Iran's nuclear sites were obliterated in a coordinated strike. He claimed that the primary objective of which was the destruction of Iran's nuclear and enrichment capacity and stop the nuclear threat. While Iran has confirmed that its nuclear facilities were hit, it has played down the overall damage. Various voices from Tehran, including the state media, said that Fordo has suffered no serious damage and that slight damage occurred only on ground, which was not irreversible. While various nuclear agencies within and outside Iran have confirmed that there is no contamination that has been detected from either of them. UN's International Atomic Energy Agency had said that it had not detected any increase in radiation levels at key nuclear sites in Iran following the U.S. airstrikes. While Saudi nuclear regulator also reported that no radioactive traces were detected in the environment of the kingdom or the Arab Gulf states as a result of U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization also said that there were no signs of contamination and that there was no danger to residents living around the targeted nuclear sites. Now, for more details, joining me on the broadcast from Berlin is Ben Aris. He is the founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also the former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. Thank you so much, Mr. Aris, for joining us on the broadcast. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
So, during the speech in Istanbul at the OIC summit, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had said that U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites is an unforgivable violation of international law and that it will exercise its legitimate right to defend itself. Now, having said that, how do you see Tehran responding to this aggression? And will it target the U.S. next, or do you think it's going to hold out the ground for now?
That's a very difficult question. I mean, we should start by saying that the attack by the states on Iran is technically illegal. Under international law, the UN Charter protects the sovereignty of countries, and that you only may attack another country if you have been attacked or you get a UN mandate, and neither of those things have happened. Having said that, obviously the States is very unhappy about the idea of Iran getting a nuclear bomb, and it wants to protect its ally in the region, Israel, which is even more unhappy about the idea. As to Tehran's response, there will be one, but it's up in the air as to what they do. They have multiple options, and I think the leadership in Tehran are going to be thinking very carefully about what they can do. I think the first thing to say is that, obviously militarily it's a very uneven fight. Tehran is completely outgunned by both Israel and the States. So how they will respond, they can't go into a head-to-head clash. Is going to be very difficult to do. But I mean, what you do is, you play to your strengths, and so they have various options. I think the trivial option is they'll continue to fire missiles at Israel, and they'll try and increase the cost of this war. They'll target residential areas. Israel's been sort of using highly precise missiles to hit military installations, and now has the US with extremely precise to destroy these nuclear facilities. And Tehran doesn't have those capabilities, but it does have, tens of thousands of missiles. And so I would have thought the first response is they're going to continue a missile campaign against Israel and target, the cities, to cause as much damage as they can, to make the people as unhappy as they can, in order to force Tel Aviv to the negotiating table to cut its losses and end this. But the wider question of whether Tehran now targets US military bases in the wider region, whether it launches a terror campaign, whether it mines the Straits of Hormuz and causes an energy crisis. I mean, these are all options open to Tehran, and it could choose any of those.
Right.
I think it'll go step by step, but it's too early to say exactly what they'll do.
You're right, it's too early to say, but we know that a lot hangs in the balance, right? And depending on how Iran chooses to respond further to the US strikes, we've already seen strong reactions pouring in. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has warned of a dangerous escalation that could spiral out of control with catastrophic consequences. While we've also heard from Yemen's Houthi rebels that have declared that the US must bear the consequences, and that this is just the beginning and definitely not the end. Now, with tensions running this high, what should we be watching for in the next 24 to 48 hours?
Well, as I say, I think the first thing we'll see is a continued missile campaign. And Tehran has also shown itself to be very cautious. It's always gone step by step. It's done measured responses. It's just been humiliated. And for the regime, that's a problem because it also has to think about domestic politics. It's got to think about the people and not actually destabilizing its own hold on power. So it has to respond somehow. But at the same time, I don't think it wants to bring the US fully into the war. This was very much a middle measure by the White House. I mean, targeted just on the nuclear facilities. And I think Trump, we can assume, doesn't want to get involved in a wider war. He doesn't want a repeat of Iraq or Afghanistan. He said repeatedly those wars were stupid. So targeting US assets in the rest of the region, military bases and the like, is probably not going to happen. So I think we'll look for a gesture, a symbolic gesture by Tehran in order to undo this humiliation, in order to respond as strongly as it can without inflaming the situation so that we end up in a broad war across the region.
Right, and Iran might not actually target US directly, but with 40,000 American troops in the region, there's a growing unease that Washington is being pulled into a war that serves Israel's interests more than its own. Now, while some of Trump's political allies have applauded the strikes, the critics, even within the conservative fold, fear that this endless war is going to fracture his political base. Now, what's your take on this? Could this move end up being a double-edged sword for Trump, politically speaking?
It's hugely risky. I mean, because there are multiple options ahead of us, and you can lose control of the situation for the Trump administration really fast. And as you said, I mean, the administration doesn't want to get into another war. Americans are becoming tired of these endless wars. And Trump himself has campaigned on ending these wars, and his whole policy so far is isolationism. He wants to break off relations with trade relations with the rest of the world because he says they're getting fleeced by the cheap exports to the US. And the same goes militarily, that he's talking about winding down the US security deal with Europe and letting them pay for their own security. And so I think the very, very last thing he wants to do is get pulled into a war. But now he's done it. I mean, now he's attacked Iran. It could well be that they are pulled into a war. And then what would that do to the Trump administration? I think his popularity is already falling. And if he drags America into yet another Middle East campaign that goes on for a decade, that would undermine his promise as well. And at some point, this is going to destabilize his whole grip on power and end up with a lot of infighting within the White House, which we're already starting to see arguments from the two sides.
Right, and when asked whether there is still room for diplomacy after the US attack, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said, not right now. Now, this sentiment has been echoed by many analysts who believe that a return to diplomacy is highly unlikely, especially at this point, and also because Iran was involved in negotiations with Washington when Israel launched its preemptive attacks more than 1 week ago. Now, according to you, is there still room for diplomacy to step in and perhaps pave the way for lasting peace in the region?
No, I don't think there is. I mean, Trump said after the attack was announced that it's going to, quote unquote, force Iran to peace talks now that the nuclear facilities have been destroyed. But I think exactly the opposite happens. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, that in the Ukraine war, they were attacked and they fought back. And again, they're the David to the Russian Goliath and have done a sterling job. The knee-jerk reaction of any regime when it's attacked like this, unprovoked, unjustified, has its own assets bombed in its own country. The people rally around the flag and they dig in and they'll do everything they can to fight back. And so the idea that these strikes are going to force Iran to do any sort of talks is, I think, complete nonsense. And I think that's clear to everyone else. And so where do we go from this? I mean, it's now a war of attrition, grinding campaign. Israel's going to continue its bombing campaign and hope for regime change in some form. But I think that's a pipe dream as well. And that, we're just going to knuckle down into one of these, the same as the Russia-Ukraine campaign. It's just going to go on until finally everyone gets tired of it. And then talks will start somewhere down the road.
Right. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. And thanks. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us, Mr. Ben.
My pleasure.